Dear friends, we continue our reading classes. Today we would like to introduce you a famous Scottish writer of the 20th century, Oswald Wynd, who spent the half of his life in the Far East, including Japan. Wynd's rich experience is reflected in his novel The Ginger Tree, an extract from which we are going to read. Enjoy listening. I didn't feel that my contribution to the success of the de Champmont-Pierre dinner party was quite so important when I found that my task was once again to attempt to make Count Kurihama say a few words while we were at table. It was quite clear that he didn't want to, and I didn't score a very startling success. I said I had seen pictures of beautiful Mount Fuji and longed to see it for myself. To this he said, "Ah." I asked if he had ever climbed the famous mountain, and he said no. I then wondered why he had not, and he said, "Too busy become soldier." I am sure he speaks English like that because he thinks it is the way people expect a Japanese to speak English. And suddenly, to my own complete surprise, I said this to him. For the first time, I think he looked straight at me. Then he laughed. It was rather like getting a laugh from Yao. It changed the Count's face completely for half a minute. No, about 3 seconds. Making him seem almost a boy. Though he did not tell me this, Marie did afterwards. He is leaving Peking next week to return to Japan for active military duty. Marie is quite sure that in the coming war between Russia and Japan, Count Kurihama is sure to distinguish himself. I don't know why she is so obsessed with the idea of this war, which she thinks France and Britain should be preparing to join on Japan's side, against what she calls the savage bear. She has been in Japan on holiday and says it is like paradise. I have been given a novel to read, said Thea, called Madame Chrysantheme by Pierre Loti. I looked at it last night before I slept. It seems to be very French, in that the heroine is a woman of doubtful virtue. After having been forced to endure me throughout dinner, I was expecting Count Kurihama to steer well clear in the drawing room, which made it quite a surprise when, as the gentleman joined us, he took a firm course to a place by my side, as though he had deliberately planned to do this. He drank his coffee and sipped his brandy, sitting with a ramrod military back, and in a true Japanese silence, staring towards one of the few open fireplaces in Peking. This gave me a view of one side of his head if I wanted it, on which there was a decided cheekbone flush from the drink he had consumed. I matched his silence, aware as I did this of Marie looking at me from across the room, perhaps considering coming to my rescue and sweeping me away to another grouping. However, this was not necessary. The Count, having finished both coffee and brandy, turned his head and said in slow but still perfect English, except that he could not make an L sound, using R's for this, so that the sentence came out as, "Please tell me about Scotland." It was quite a tall order, but I began by saying that we also had a sacred mountain called Ben Nevis, which is also often snow-capped. He seemed mildly interested and asked if it was a volcano. I told him that all our volcanoes had gone to sleep some millions of years ago, for which we were very thankful, though we still had earthquakes at a place called Comrie, and I had experienced one while staying in a hotel near there with my mother. The Count then said that at his home in Tokyo there is usually an earthquake every 10 days or so, small ones, but that if as long as a month or two goes by with no shake, people become nervous, expecting a big one. I asked what happens in a big one, and was told that people get knocked off their feet and tiles come down from the roof. It all sounds rather terrifying, and I asked him if the earthquakes were the result of volcanic activity. But he said no, Japan was mounted on the back of a huge dragon, which was subject to uneasy dreams. I think he meant this as a joke, but he didn't laugh, so I didn't either. Really, he's an odd man. I found myself wanting to make him smile again, but was not successful. More interesting books are waiting for you in our Чижевский library. You are welcome.